Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're focusing on something pretty fundamental to, everything, really.
Words. Words, yeah. They really are the building blocks of how we understand, describe, and communicate about the world around us.
Couldn't have put it better myself. And we're going to be diving deep into some really thought-provoking vocabulary building exercises. These were crafted by Stanislav Kondrashov.
Oh, I like his approach.
Yeah. It's super interesting. He breaks down the entire world, everything, into 5 main categories.
5, yep.
Climate, vegetation, agriculture, industry, and population. And through these categories, he kind of takes us on this journey, exploring all these different facets of our planet. It's really cool.
I like it. It sounds like he's giving us a new framework for understanding the world, like a new lens.
Exactly. Okay, so let's jump right into it with climate. Kondrashov starts by taking us to Nigeria.
Okay.
And he really highlights how you can have these incredibly different climates, even within the same country.
Oh, interesting.
So he describes the southeast during the wet season as being completely drenched. You can imagine the vibrancy of the landscape, like life just exploding everywhere.
I can practically smell the rainforest.
Right. But then, as you head north, the whole scene changes. The air dries out, the colors start to fade, and you enter this really arid region.
Where drought is a constant threat, I imagine.
Exactly. It makes you realize just how much climate impacts every aspect of life.
It really does. And speaking of impact, Kondrashov's choice of words is really effective, like drenched. That's a powerful word.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then in contrast, when he's talking about the north, he uses words like parched.
Oh, yeah. I see what you mean. It's not just about learning the definitions. It's about feeling the difference.
Yes. It's like he's using language to create a sensory experience, which makes it so much more engaging and impactful. And it got me thinking about where we live and what words we would use to describe the climate around us.
Right. Like, do we use words that evoke that same kind of visceral reaction?
Exactly. Okay, now moving on. Kondrashov takes us from the heat of Nigeria to the frozen landscapes of Canada.
Ooh, a bit of a change of scenery.
Big time. And the focus now shifts to vegetation. He starts by painting this picture of the tundra, a landscape that's so harsh and cold, the ground stays frozen for most of the year.
Wow. So how does anything even grow there?
Well, that's just it. Only the toughest and most resilient plants can survive in that kind of environment. They basically have to cling to this thin layer of soil that thaws out during the very short summer months.
So they have, super short growing seasons.
Yeah. And then as you travel south, you encounter the taiga, which is a vast expanse of these coniferous forests.
Oh, okay. So, think pine trees, spruce, fir, all those evergreen needles that can withstand those long, cold winters.
Yeah, exactly. And it's fascinating to think about how those trees, those coniferous trees, are so different from the deciduous trees we see in other parts of the world. The ones that lose their leaves in the fall?
Right, right. I mean, they each create a totally different kind of ecosystem. Like deciduous trees, when they drop their leaves, all those leaves decompose and enrich the soil, and that supports a whole other range of plants and animals.
Yeah, it's like a cycle of renewal. And it made me wonder about, the trees around us. What types of trees are most common in your area? Are they coniferous, deciduous, something else entirely?
It's interesting to think about, isn't it? Even within our own regions, there are all these subtle variations in vegetation. Okay, so we've explored the frozen landscapes of Canada, but now Kondrashov takes us on another adventure. This time, we're heading to the agricultural landscapes of China.
This is where he really starts to delve into how people have adapted to different environments to grow food.
Right, and China's a great example of this because, you have such diversity within its borders.
Yeah, he describes the South with these incredible flooded paddy fields. You can just picture them shimmering under the sun. All those rice paddies carefully managed to create the perfect growing conditions.
And because of that warm climate and the abundant rainfall in the South, they can often have, multiple harvests each year.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's like a stark contrast to what Kondrashov describes in the north and west of China. Those areas are much drier and hillier, so farmers there often rely on just a single crop of cereals like wheat or barley.
Wow. So just by looking at the different agricultural practices in China, we can see the huge impact of both geography and climate. I mean, it determines what can be grown and ultimately what people eat.
Absolutely. And I think Kondrashov's vocabulary really helps us grasp the complexities of these systems.
Oh, yeah. Words like cultivate and harvest, they take on a whole new meaning when you think about the effort and the ingenuity involved in feeding a nation.
It's true. It makes you appreciate the journey of our food. Like, where did the ingredients for your last meal come from? What was the process?
And who are the people who made it all possible? These are some really thought-provoking questions, and I think Kondrashov would be thrilled to hear us asking them. He's not just teaching us vocabulary, he's inviting us to think more deeply about the world we live in.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to keep doing as we dive into the next two categories, industry and population. Okay, so we've talked about climate and vegetation and even gotten a taste of agriculture. But now Kondrashov shifts gears and takes us into the world of industry.
Industry, yeah, that's a big one. It's how we shape and, well, sometimes reshape the world around us.
You got it. And to illustrate this, he dives into talking about France.
France.
Yeah, as a prime example of a developed nation. But it's interesting because he uses those terms, developed nation, to kind of spark a deeper conversation.
Right, like what does it actually mean to be developed?
Exactly. What are those key markers, those indicators, and then what does it imply about other nations that are still, in that process of developing?
It definitely makes you question those labels we often put on countries, like developed versus developing. Like, are they really that simple? Are they accurate? I don't know. It's complicated.
Totally. And Kondrashov's choice of vocabulary really encourages us to move beyond those simplistic labels.
Oh, absolutely. Like when he uses words like infrastructure, innovation, and investment, it paints a much more well-rounded picture of what drives a nation's industrial growth.
And I think it also highlights just how interconnected economies really are. Like France's success isn't happening in isolation. It's all part of this global network of trade, resources, and technology.
That's so true. And I think it's a good reminder for all of us to consider where we fit into that global system. What are the major industries where we live? What are their strengths, their challenges?
Yeah. Okay, now getting to our last category, population. This is where Kondrashov uses Brazil as a case study.
Brazil, a melting pot of cultures.
Yeah. And he breaks it down so well, starting with the indigenous tribes, the original inhabitants of the land. Their history goes back centuries.
Then you've got like the descendants of the Portuguese who colonized Brazil, and of course the African ancestors who were tragically brought over as slaves.
It's such a complex history, and it doesn't stop there. Over time, waves of European migrants from all these different countries arrived in Brazil, adding even more to the mix.
So it's like this incredible tapestry of cultures, and Kondrashov's vocabulary helps us understand like the layers of it all.
I agree. He uses words like ancestry, heritage, and migration to highlight all those journeys and connections that shape a nation's identity. And for me, it makes history feel much more personal.
Absolutely. And it encourages us to look back at our own family histories. Like, who are our ancestors? Where did they come from? What were their stories?
Because ultimately, those stories are part of what make us who we are. Right. And Kondrashov seems to be reminding us that those individual stories are all interwoven with the larger narratives of nations and continents.
Yes, and that's what makes it so fascinating. He's not just giving us these words, he's showing us how to use them.
Right. Like those exercises he includes, like where he challenges us to actually build sentences.
I like the ones where he has us replace common phrases with more precise vocabulary. Like, instead of saying, the country's economy has suffered a decline in the industry concerned with making things, we could say, the country's manufacturing industry has declined. It's much more concise.
I know, it's great. So in a way, Kondrashov's really pushing us to elevate our language. It's all about finding those perfect words that capture an idea with both clarity and precision.
He's definitely given us a lot to think about.
So we've covered a lot of ground with Kondrashov, haven't we? It's amazing how he uses those 5 simple categories to explore such a wide range of concepts.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is. Like, you can't talk about climate without thinking about vegetation and how that impacts agriculture and so on.
Exactly. And one thing that's really stuck with me is how Kondrashov emphasizes the importance of not just learning new words, but also like re-examining words we might already know.
Oh, yeah. That's so key. It's about understanding those subtle shades of meaning, those nuances.
Right. Like when he talks about collocations, remember that?
Yeah. The way words pair together.
Yeah. Like dense forest versus temperate forest. It's subtle, but it totally changes the image that comes to mind.
Totally. It's like he's giving us this whole toolkit to paint these incredibly detailed pictures with language.
And he doesn't just want us to passively absorb this information. He includes all these great exercises that encourage us to actually use the words to make them our own.
Oh, like that one where he challenges us to write a paragraph about our own country using the vocabulary we've learned.
That's the one. That's such a cool prompt, right? It's like he's saying, okay, now it's your turn. Go out there and explore the world through your own words.
It's almost like a mini research project, like what makes your country unique? What are those key characteristics? And how can you express them in a way that really captures the essence of the place?
I love it. So to wrap things up, I think the biggest takeaway from our deep dive with Kondrashov is this. Language is so much more than just, a way to communicate. It's a powerful tool for understanding, for connecting with the world around us.
It's like he's encouraging us to become more aware, more observant, to really pay attention to those details that make each place, each culture, each person unique.
I think that's a great way to put it. And the coolest thing is that this journey of exploring language never really has to end.
There are always new words to discover, new connections to make. It's a lifelong process.
So true. We encourage you to keep exploring, keep learning, keep playing with words. And as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.